Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to Beyond the Matrix with Rod Bryant and Jerry Gordon. Here on Israel News Talk Radio. Unplug. Strap yourself in because you are about to move beyond the Matrix.
You're listening to Beyond the Matrix. I'm Rod Bryant along with Jerry Gordon here on Israel News Talk Radio. Really, guys, we really appreciate you listening in each week and giving us your comments. If you would like to send Jerry or myself an email directly, remember all complaints go to Jerry Gordon at Jerry at israelnewstalkradio.com and Rod, all the positive stuff, Rod at israelnewstalkradio.com. I say that jokingly. We don't get any negative comments. We do. Maybe you just don't share them with me when they come to you, so who knows.
Oh, I get these comments that I put into the file 13.
Oh, the file 13. Yeah, the secret file. Why don't you introduce our guest, which he doesn't need an introduction, but introduce our guest.
Stephen Bryan was a former Reagan-era Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Security and Technology, and he is known as a taskmaster, an expert in military technology all across the globe. In this case, in today's program, he's also a columnist for the Asia Times, and he keeps a watching brief on what's occurring in China with regard to its predatory actions on our infrastructure here in the United States, our intellectual property, and frankly, messing things up in the global markets.
Jerry, what are we going to find out in the show is this is a very serious issue. It's gone on way too long. Our economies have completely been changed from a very self-sufficient economy in which people would go to work and work 30 years and have retirements. Now people have to settle for a lot less pay, a lot less benefits. Though we have a lot of cheap stuff from China, we also have less national security. And so we have a great show lined up for you. Don't go away. If anything, take time, grab a cup of tea, your favorite cup of coffee, or your favorite libation. Sit back and listen to Beyond the Matrix here on Israel News Talk Radio. And we also want to say, if you want to watch the show on YouTube, go to Nativ, N-E-T-I-V, online, one word, Nativ online, and you can watch the show live at this very moment. So don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages here on Israel News Talk Radio.
G'day, I'm Jono Vandor.
And I'm Ross Nichols.
Join us on our program, Israel on My Mind, a show that broadcasts all the weekly goodness that flows like milk and honey from the Holy Land straight into your ears with humorous and happy news stories.
New shows are posted every Thursday at 7 p.m. Israel time, highlighting the lighter side and advancing a positive view of Israel here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
I'm Rod Bryant along with Jerry Gordon, our fantastic producer, and we have Stephen Bryan on. We have a very interesting topic to talk about, and we have some updates to give you as well. Stephen, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Is your wife keeping you in line? I see that you're now out of your studio into the guest room.
Yeah, well, maybe it's better to be there than to be out the back door.
In the doghouse. But if you're like me, I have a little suite outside. It makes it nicer. It's air conditioned.
Well, that's an improvement. Yeah,
and it's next to the pool.
Too clean.
And next to the pool as well, so it makes it nice.
We don't have pools up here in the north.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, now Jerry.
We do.
Jerry he lives in the exclusive area of Panama. What do you call it? Pensacola, Florida. So he's with the retired Jewish world. So while we're at it, let's jump right into the questions. How about that?
Okay.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jerry. You want to start?
Yeah, China is the U.S. largest trading partner, surpassing both Canada and Mexico. How does that complicate U.S. national security in a globalized economy? And frankly, can anything be done to change it?
Well, I don't think much can be done to change it in the short term, frankly. Although, we become from China, and uh, people buy tons of that stuff. In fact, just about everything you see nowadays on the commercial side is coming from China. And it would be nice to have some of those manufacturing jobs back in the United States. We have to learn how to recompete, to compete again. Unfortunately, our companies take the easy way out and get cheap labor and lots of it in China, and so they think it's better. But I don't think it's better.
The question that I have is, do you really think that the American buyer is willing now to pay the higher rates that would cost to have American-made products 100%?
I think it depends on the quality of the product. If the product is really good, I think people will pay for it. The problem is we've been shipping all our technology over to China. So, it's not really competitive anymore because they can do it at a lower price. But if we don't give them our technology and we produce here, then I think we can have a good marketplace here domestically.
Now, in some aspects, Israel is having the same kind of issues, correct?
I don't know. Are they?
Well, that's the way I understand that they've got these trade, what do you call it, trade
deficits, you mean?
Well, some not necessarily trade deficits, but a lot of trade deals going on between productions, et cetera, research, and also the Chinese wanted to buy into a major research development center in Israel itself, and I don't know if they're maybe entering into the same thing.
I don't know. I mean, Israel's is a different kind of economy than the U.S. economy. It never had a large industrial manufacturing base. It wasn't a steel producer. It wasn't an automobile producer. It wasn't a maker of refrigerators, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha,
et cetera.
yeah.
America was always a manufacturing country. We had huge industry. Now we have huge rust belts. We lost a lot of industry that's gone off to Asia and mostly to China. Now the big question, I think, for the economists and for those concerned about the future of America is that a smart model for us? Because we have a large population. Do we want just a service economy and then an underclass, or do we want a really vigorous middle class? In my opinion, labor, properly salaried labor with retirement, with everything that labor should have, is what we want, because we want that solid center core in this country. It's vital to maintaining a democratic society. I mean, people forget that the whole thesis of democracy, modern democracy, from John Locke forward, has been based on entrepreneurship and economy that was the foundation of making it possible to have a true democratic society. So I think it's a very interesting challenge right now because we've lost so much. So many manufacturing jobs have left this country. And I don't know if we can get them back or not, but we ought to try.
I think it's worth the effort. I believe all three of us remember a time when individuals, especially our fathers and uncles, et cetera, had careers in industry that would last 30 years, and they would retire. They had good retirements and bonuses, et cetera. We don't have that anymore. People jump from a dozen jobs in a career, correct?
Well, if they can. I mean, but a lot of people just don't have jobs. I mean, or
right.
much poorer jobs. And I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, which was at one time a beautiful town. It's not anymore. It's a war zone today. But when I grew up, we had Camel Soups, we had RCA, we had a huge shipyard. The USS battleship New Jersey was built in Camden. By the way, it's back there now as a museum.
Right.
But all that's gone. All of it's gone. I mean, simply wiped out. And what went? The middle class that held all that together is gone too, because there's no reason for them to be there anymore. And it's really sad story. I mean, very sad story.
We're having some audio issues, so if we keep having that, we'll somehow try to do a reset. But we'll go ahead and go ahead. You are correct.
You froze for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. You are correct. It is a very sad story. And Camden, New Jersey, used to be the hotbed of jobs, industry, et cetera, but that's been gone a long time ago. I mean, we're not.
It fell apart. It started to fall apart in the 50s. Yes.
Right.
And it wasn't that it went to China or anything like that. It was just it fell apart because of suburbanization, because industries found cheaper labor elsewhere. And if you think of it, it's like a big wave pushed across the country and then out of the country. So steel is gone. I taught at Lehigh University years ago. We had a huge Bethlehem Steelworks. We had a huge Coke factory. Not that I loved it, because it made my car filthy every morning. But it was it employed 25,000 people. It's gone.
Well, we still have a Coke industry.
From Bethlehem, it's still gone.
We still have a Coke industry, but it's not the legal one.
Yeah, but wrong time. The wrong time. I don't think you wanted to.
No, I remember being in Pittsburgh in the early 80s as a young man, and that was right at the point that things began to just collapse. The steel industry was shutting down, and man, now Pittsburgh has made a good turnaround as far as going to high tech and medical, et cetera, but man, for a long time, I didn't know that Pittsburgh was ever going to recover from that.
That's right. And of course, now we have all these high-tech industries that are investing in China, that are building plants in China, that are no longer interested in building in the United States. That's the real tragedy we're facing. And then behind that is the issue of technology.
Right.
Because if we export our technology, what do we have? What do we have? We want to maintain a middle-class society where people have decent wages, decent living conditions, that are treated with respect and dignity. Those are things that are absolutely vital to our culture and to our democracy.
Right.
And that's what we're trading off, and no one's stopping it.
Right.
No one's stopping it.
Well, God willing, we're going to see a change in the next few years. Jerry, you had something you want to jump in on. Go ahead.
Well, before I jump in on the question, I grew up in what was called a General Electric community, Lynn, Massachusetts, which is home of the first manufactured jet engines in the United States. But the thing that was most prized was to be selected to enter into what was called the GE apprenticeship program, because you were no longer an apprentice working in manufacturing, but you also ended up getting a degree, for example, in electrical or mechanical engineering, depending upon what your aptitudes were about, and GE paid for it.
Right, sure.
That kind of intellectual or intelligence-driven base, I think, really ended by the adoption of these engulf and devour acquisition models that began under Neutron Jack, as we called him, and his predecessor.
Jack Welch, yeah, right.
Actually, the period you were talking about in the 60s.
Yeah.
You had to be number one and number two in the top leading industrial sectors in this country, or you're worth nothing.
Well, the only industry we held on to, more or less, has been jet engines, because the technology is protected by the Pentagon. And if the Pentagon hadn't protected that technology, it'd be all out the door entirely.
That's correct. You wouldn't have GE or Pratt & Whitney, for example.
Those are the two big ones, yeah. But there's others. Williams Research is one. There's a number of others. Scarrett is another one. But the most important processes were the metallurgical processes underlying those engines, was called the single crystal metallurgy, which is used to make the fan blades, and the type of casting is a process called gatorizing. I know a lot about it because I was deeply engaged in that when I was in the Defense Department.
Now, is that something we still have proprietary knowledge and use of?
We are still holding on to it, but I think we're standing on a fragile stool with three legs. I mean, I think we're reaching the end of that game because a lot of that technology has been spread around. And even though we still have export controls, it's a problem still.
Well, when we come back after the break, I want to talk about the estimated $5 trillion of U.S. intellectual property rights that China has been able to engage in infringement, and how do we deal with that? It's really important. But this is not only an issue with the United States. This is an issue worldwide, and I'd like to address it in just a moment. You're listening to Beyond the Matrix. I want to thank those who are listening or actually watching on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And if you want to watch on YouTube, go to Netiv, N-E-T-I-V online, one solid word on YouTube, and you can watch the show, all of the stuff in between, the breaks, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll be right back after these messages here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi everyone, this is Andrea Siminto from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Siminto, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Back from the break, and right before the break, I was asking Stephen Bryan, who we have here as our guest, as we normally have him on a regular basis here on Israel News Talk Radio. We asked him about the $5 trillion of U.S. intellectual property rights. How does that work, and how has China been able to engage in this infringement for so long?
Well, first of all, let's be careful about that number, because I'm not sure that's a real number.
Are you thinking it's too high, or
it may be bigger?
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
It's impossible to know because no one's done the work to dig it out, and it would take a tremendous effort at this stage. You know, this has been going on for, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years now. Ever since about 85, I think, is a good number, good time to consider that the things started to shift over. And so the amount that's happened with the Chinese is rather a lot. What has happened, aside from the U.S. selling technology to China, which there's been an awful lot of, and investing in manufacturing in China, which there's been an awful lot of. Keep in mind that the Chinese have moved in many different ways to penetrate our whole infrastructure of science, whether it's in the universities, whether it's in the laboratories, whether it's in industry, and they're everywhere. And we had no restrictions on them, whatever. So that, and then when they couldn't get it through the front door, they got it out the back door using cyber spying, very successfully, including a lot of defense programs, but also very many commercial programs. A lot of industrial companies that are in the industrial sphere really don't know how much they lost. And then all of a sudden something shows up, looks just like theirs, and they wonder why. So the full extent of this, we don't know yet.
Is it because we underestimated their intelligence capabilities in the corporate world?
No, we didn't really care to protect our technology.
Wow, okay.
I think it was a conscious decision that a lot of companies wanted to take advantage of the Chinese market, which they consider, 1 billion people and money. They were attracted strongly to it, and they really didn't care. And they pressured the government to back off any export controls and any other regulations because they wanted to set up in China. It's as simple as that. So the politics of it are that. They wanted to get in that market. They didn't care what it cost to get in that market. They were under pressure, of course, as public companies in many cases, but not only public companies, but a lot of them. Universities wanted to get in on it because it was money, okay? and scientists, and the scientists wanted to get in on the 1,000 Talents program that the Chinese were offering. The Confucian institutes, the Chinese were sticking in universities. Laboratories wanted to get in, and we'll show them what we know. They'll show us what they know. Well, they didn't know anything, but they were happy to take what we knew. So, I mean, where it led us to is this downward spiral that we've lost a good segment of our commercial industry. Our defense industry has been badly compromised by what's been lost. Take the F-35 as a great example. The Chinese have the J-30, which is a stealthy aircraft, very much like either the F-35 or the F-22. It has bits of both. So we've just lost so much. I mean, it's hard to even, I mean, if you talk about trillions and all the costs, I used to say to people, nowadays we have two defense budgets, one for us and one for them. Because the reality is, well, it's true, because if you got your defense know-how going out to China, either legally or illegally, you're paying for it. The American taxpayer is paying for it.
Right.
It's not free. And by the way, it has another consequence, because China is able to match American capabilities by using our own technology against us. Our defense investment is very badly compromised. It costs billions to build defense systems. There are very few that cost less than that these days.
Right.
If you take the F-35 program, the total investment in that program will be about $1.5 trillion. That's right. That, as Everett Dirksen used to say, that's real money. And that means that we're figuring that's good. A modern jet fighter should stay in the inventory 30 to 40 years, typically. Typically. Yeah. That's because you have to amortize that investment. It's so huge. If it's only good for 5 or 10 years, you're really in trouble, because you can't replace it that fast. It's impossible. It's not. It takes 10 to 12 years to build a new defense system from the beginning, from scratch. So you can't replace it very fast. And then to manufacture, it's another 10 years. So you're 20 years out from the replacement. So you can imagine that this is endangering America's national security. And the point I really want to stress is that that's what we should, not only our economy, not only our workforce, not only our democracy, but even our very security is at risk because of the way we've conducted ourselves in the past 35, 40 years.
Jerry, go ahead.
One example of that currently is the administration embargoing sales of U.S. manufactured chips for the G5 telecom system of Huawei. And yet, how can Huawei get around that, Steve?
Well, it's a 5G, not G5.
5G, whatever.
But okay. 5G is an important technology. Some people think it's more important than it is, but okay. The point is that for Huawei to produce its telephones and other equipment, not just its switching equipment, it relies to some extent on integrated circuits from the United States, from Taiwan, and from South Korea, and a little bit from Japan. And that's the sources of supply, because it's a globalized kind of process. So what the Trump administration did was to say anything that's manufactured on U.S. equipment, can't be sold to Huawei. Okay, and everybody uses U.S. equipment. So the game that's being carried out right now is some of our friends in Korea, especially, are looking to de-U.S., remove the U.S. from the equation by using equipment that they manufacture locally or buy from somebody else, like from Japan or wherever, even though the Koreans and Japanese don't get along these days, which is kind of fun, actually, when you think about it. They'd like to make, Samsung in particular would like to sell to China because it's a very big market for them. And they like to sell to Huawei, which is a very big company. So the thought is that they will try to circumnavigate the U.S. restrictions through that technique. The U.S. has very little leverage in this situation, direct leverage under current law. Now, if the laws change, it's a different ballgame. And Congress is not very thrilled with all this. So Let's see what Congress does about it. If Samsung, which is the suspect in this equation, decides to make chips for Huawei, that's one of the issues. There's also a Taiwanese company, the big one that sells to Huawei and is trying. They're getting smart, though. They've already put a factory in the United States, and they're trying to figure out how to balance the equation. In the bigger picture, and I think there is a much bigger picture here, the issue is that we're still going to have to compete with Huawei around the world. We consider it a danger because it affects telecom, and it means that all telecom, which also includes internet today, will be exposed to Chinese spying right at the source, and that's very worrisome.
You're cutting out there for a second. You said that's
and rightfully so. It's not worrisome.
Okay, we're going to have to
other governments.
Hold on, Stephen, hold on one second. We just had a delay in the internet. Just a second. You said that's very worrisome, and continue.
Well, I said it's very worrisome to us, to the U.S., because of national security reasons, but it's not so worrisome to other governments around the world. And the administration has made a very strong effort to persuade our allies in Europe, our allies in Asia, Australia, and others not to use Huawei equipment. And from what I'm observing, we're still having trouble.
Well, look, I mean, it wasn't just a few years ago. There was a big cabal over servers that we were even putting in the Department of Defense that they had to end up pulling because of Chinese ability to spy. That's a pretty scary thing. So can you imagine if they had the full capability of listening in or taking data from telephone networks? That's a mind-boggling concept to think about what that could do to our national security.
Right. Well, I think the bottom line is we want to, as far as we possibly can, protect what we call our critical infrastructure.
Right.
And that includes telecommunications, includes transportation, includes government, includes the military, and many other things, and water supply, power, electricity, petroleum, supplies, all that. And we have a lot of work to do. We're not very good at this right now.
Well, I'm hoping that we can cinch that up. I know that President Trump, since the beginning of his campaign, was talking about China. A lot of people thought that it was bloviating over an issue that's not really an issue. But we have now in this show really began to define how deep of a problem it is, and it's not just going to be dealt with by a few, sanctions. It's like it's going to have to be a comprehensive thing, and my concern is whether the Congress, as it is today, is willing to make those kinds of decisions because of what they have to risk. We have to go to a break, so when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit more. You're listening to Beyond the Matrix here on Israel News Talk Radio. We have Stephen Bryan here with us. Jerry Gordon is our producer. Don't go away, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Leap of Faith with Penina Taylor.
We live in the age of information, but not inspiration. If you're like me, you're looking to be inspired to reach higher, to connect more, and to grow. Well, if you want to get warm, you need to stand close to the fire. And if you want to catch fire, you need to stand close enough to get hit by the sparks. Join me, Penina Taylor, as we walk with people who have embarked on a spiritual journey towards Torah. We'll uncover what started them on their journey and what truths they discovered along the way. So prepare to be inspired as we take a leap of faith every Sunday at 5 p.m. on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back from the break. Thank you so much for coming into the very last segment of Beyond the Matrix. We really appreciate you guys joining the show each week. Stephen, right before the break, we We're addressing the issues of what needs to be done in the United States to deal with the the technological spying, the intellectual rights, etc. But my question is if President Donald Trump gets another 4 years, do you think that he's going to even make a dent in it? And what do you think it's going to need? What do you think he's going to need to be able to do that?
Well, I think the president wants to do it. They're already starting to crack down on the Chinese operating here. So I think that's a great indicator that more will be done in future. But I don't think he can do it by himself. I think he absolutely needs the support of the Congress. That's not only, I think Congress sentimentally right now is moving in that direction. The question is, what will the Congress and the administration want to do? And there, I think there's some very specific challenges. One is the export control system, which is badly broken. It's ineffectual. It's not helping support us against China. In fact, it's undermining us. So we absolutely need very strong export control laws that are effective, and they have to be rewritten from top to bottom, because the old laws were all written because they were going to be multinational. Oh, we'll have the French, and we'll have the Russians, and we'll have the Germans, and we'll have the British, and all that. Forget about it. Let's have the United States decide what it wants to do for the United States.
I agree 100%.
That's very, very critical.
Yes.
So strengthening export controls is absolutely top priority. The second top priority is all these Chinese scientists and engineers coming to the United States and in the universities, in the development laboratories, in our corporations. We have to put in strong visa controls and keep them out. Right now, you know, they have a little crackdown going on for any scientist who says he's not taking money from who lies to the FBI or misleads to the various agencies like the Defense Department or Department of Homeland Security or the NIH or others. When they're asked the question, are you doing anything with the Chinese? They say, oh, no. That's lying to them. And
So really you're saying the vetting system is not thorough? Or no?
No, it's terrible.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't exist, really. Everyone simply ignored it. And then beyond the people who take government money, or, there's also the question of those who were actually active in the Chinese army coming here. And then they say, oh, no, we're not in the Chinese. They just arrested the guy because he lied on his visa. He said, well, I'm not in the Chinese. Well, he's a major in the Chinese army, active major. But anyway, the main point is that that's the top of the glass or say the ice cream sundae. That's the cherry and a little bit of the whipped cream. But the rest of the ice cream, we have to get that too. And I think we need new visa laws on any of this kind of scientific exchange. It needs to be vetted. It needs to be vetted. And we have to decide if it's in our national interest. I mean, the Harvard scientist case is one that's very interesting because it's in a very sensitive area, nanotechnology. Mm-hmm. They can't attack him for that because that was legal. There's nothing illegal about it. But why is it legal? Why is it possible for a Harvard scientist to be cooperating with China on technology that has huge military and national security implications, plus economic implications? Why do we allow it? We don't have any controls over scientific research at above the basic level. I'm not talking about basic, but I'm talking once you get a little bit above into the applied level, we need to review those kinds of relationships to make sure they're in the national interest. And if they're not in the national interest, we shouldn't allow it. We have no system to do that right now that's effective. If theoretically, under the export control laws, we're supposed to watch technical data, but most of them are watching TV. They don't know what they're looking at. There's no professional capability to review this because they don't have the right people looking at it. So we need to absolutely change all that and do it. And Congress needs to help. Can't be done without legislation.
That seems like a good role for the FBI to be involved in because they have such a variety.
They are involved in it. They are involved in it, but the problem is the FBI doesn't have that expertise.
Huh.
They're not scientists; they're policemen. They don't know
I
what they're
get
looking at. DOD knows a little bit. The CIA knows a lot more, but they're not involved in this process. The FBI is going out now and trying to check on some of these scientists, but they have no ground to stand on unless some U.S. law was violated.
Got you. So they almost need to hire. It needs to be a more eclectic group of scientists and law enforcement, the whole nine yards. It needs to be a whole nother division of some kind.
We need to have legislation and organization.
Right. Yeah.
And if you don't have the legislation and the organization and the mindset to go out and do this, it will never get done.
It is. You're absolutely right. Hopefully, God willing, we're going to see a change. But my concern is still, Congress always makes policies based on how much money they're going to put in their constituents' pockets or their own pockets. And that's what bothers me. Is they're benefiting from this?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
Really? Really?
Kind of taking the cynical view.
So do you think it's because, do you just think
I think that Congress is upset with China. I think China, the real issue, I think the political issue is not that. The real political issue is the power of a lot of U.S. industry that wants to do business in China, and they'll try to leverage Congress.
Oh, I get that. Yeah.
And the universities are going to raise hell about it. Oh, you're stopping us from having basic research and having relations around the world, and we're global, and screw you. And that's what we're going to be facing, and that's the real issue.
I get it. I'll acquiesce. Go ahead, Jerry. You got it. Go ahead.
Okay. One factoid is those recent regs regarding Chinese students coming to the United States. There's a specific reason why American universities and colleges don't want that to be prevented. It's called $13 billion.
Everybody has an economic incentive.
That's correct.
So does the professors.
Yep.
Yeah, because they get research grants. They more get on the Academy of Sciences in China as an associate member, or they get 1,000 talents, or they get a nice apartment in Wuhan, or they get money. All the above. It's not easy to do. I mean, we've allowed something to develop which is not in the national interest. That's the point, isn't it?
Yes.
We've allowed it to develop, and now it's hurting us. So we're going to either let it continue, and we're going to let us bleed more, or we're going to stop it. But if we let us bleed more, I don't think we have much blood left.
Don't you think also
transfusion has failed? Huh?
Don't you think also it comes down to the American voter insisting on national security and insisting on a clampdown on this? Because if not, who's actually going to do anything about it?
Well, I think the sentiment toward China right now is pretty negative.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah. Jerry, you had something you wanted to ask from the break.
Yes, before we.
But people have to understand. People have to understand what needs to be done.
It's going to require some work and sacrifice. Jerry, go ahead.
Steve, how dangerous is China's maneuverings in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits, and what do we have in the way of capabilities to counter it?
Well, we have bases in the area, at least close in Japan. We have bases. In Okinawa, we have bases. In Korea, we have bases. But then you go all the way over to Guam before we have a base, or all the way down to Australia, which is very far away. Or you go even further to Diego Garcia. So we're pretty far out there. We have aircraft carriers. Right now, we have 3 aircraft carriers, the Nimitz, the Ronald Reagan, and the Theodore Roosevelt operating in the Pacific. First time in very, very many years we had so many, maybe since World War II, we've actually had 3 major carriers at one time operating. We're trying to send a message to China, say, hey guys, you keep screwing around with us, it can get nasty.
For the sake of the reader, watcher, and the listener, explain to them it's not just 3 ships; it's 3 carrier groups. That is a massive amount.
3 aircraft carrier groups. Each carrier has got 66 fighter jets on it. There's a lot of punch there. And then, of course, they have the other carriers out there that can carry Marines, that can carry anti-submarine warfare systems. They can, they have air defenses. They're pretty. It's a pretty sophisticated. They call them task forces that go out with each carrier. It's one of the great inventions of the United States. Something the Chinese are trying to emulate, by the way. They now have 2 little carriers.
Right, but they're nowhere near the capability of anti-missile, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
they carry like 15 or 18 planes, and the planes are really substandard, and they've got a long way to go to try and match a U.S. carrier.
So it's a major statement from the United States to put that out there in the Pacific, right? I think we just lost Stephen.
Yeah.
Stephen?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay, good. So
look, we're trying to reassure our allies, but our allies are yeah.
Can
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. But you were going to say that, yes, it's a major statement, but you said the allies, what? And we're getting ready to run out of time.
Well, our allies are not doing their job,
right.
Especially Japan, which is a big disappointment. Today, yesterday or today, it depends on the time zone you're in, Japan said we're not going to go ahead with this air defense, using the missile defense system. We're not spending the money. Huh?
No.
You're not spending
exactly.
the money.
And the point is that puts us on the front line of having to deal with this. Look,
well, I think people are getting tired of that. I think
Yeah.
the president's absolutely right about that.
Stephen, we're
allies.
completely out of time. I am so sorry. We'll have to bring you back on. We'll finish this conversation. Guys, you've been listening to Beyond the Matrix here on Israel News Talk Radio. We'll see you this time next week. Shalom, shalom.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.